Okay, and call to order the Rules, Enactments, and Intergovernmental Relations Committee meeting to order. Ask everyone to please rise and join me in the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, I'd just like to remind everyone to please silence your cell phones, electronic devices, and keep in mind that the mics on the AV, whatever you want to call it, are very sensitive, so try to keep the side conversation to a minimum. The meeting is being live streamed. It can be found on the county website. With that, Doreen, can we have a roll call, please?
Absolutely. Amo, Cheney.
Here.
Fagion.
Here.
Hines.
Here.
Paduk.
Here.
Sierra. Sutherland. Here. Riskevich.
Here.
6 present, 2 out.
Okay, sorry with everybody. I'm gonna flip the agenda around here a little bit. First, we're gonna do item number 2, resolution recognizing March as Women's History Month. Okay, motion in second.
Sutherland.
Okay, Duke and Sutherland, any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. All right, next up, we have Kevin Hines, legislator, chairman of the committee to review information to technology contracts. For presentation, final report from the committee to review information to technology contracts. And I just want to remind everyone this is for information purposes and we will not be voting on it. Kevin, the floor is yours.
Thank you. As you know, this committee came about as of from the authority of the legislature, Resolution 282 of 2023, where we were asked to review the IT contracts. Committee consisted of Legislator Lujan, Majority Leader Fagion, Legislator Sassy, and myself. And Chairwoman Benelli was at every meeting, as was Council Betsy Abraham. And I know Kelly worked like crazy on this, as well as the rest of the staff as well. So we thank all of them for their work. Came about as a result of a press conference on October 25th, 2023, by Senator Skoufis, legislators Ramos and Agnastakis, Paduk, and Tortel. They alleged sweetheart deal on behalf of, or for the benefit of Commissioner Langdon Chapman and his brother-in-law, the owner of Star CIO, Mr. Isaac Sikolik. They also alleged Mr. Sikolik was in dire financial straits with his house in foreclosure. And I'm here to say that that's not true. The documents they had in their hand that day said that Mr. Sikolik's mortgage was paid in full. The house was owned outright. And I'm also here to say that we found nothing wrong on behalf of Commissioner Chapman. We found no evidence that he did anything wrong other than a mere suggestion that his brother-in-law was a highly qualified IT individual. The committee interviewed a bunch of people, starting with Commissioner of General Services, Samantha Swikata, Commissioner of Human Resources, Langdon Chapman, legislators Ramos, Paduk, Tortel, and Agnastakis, Director of Cost Control, Alicia D'Amico, Deputy County Executive Harry Poor, County Attorney Rick Golden, and the County Executive Stephen Newhouse. The report describes the interviews of each of these individuals with footnotes as to the videos that everybody can find on the county website for all the committee meetings. So a lot of the pages, I'm sorry, the books weren't handed out yet. We take a minute to let everybody actually have it. Then I'll take you through the pages of the findings.
Thank you.
The first, I guess, 32 pages are summaries of the interviews with the individuals I just mentioned. You can leave those at your pleasure. They all have footnote sites as to what was said and where on the tape you can find those statements. And then I'd like to jump ahead to page 32, if you want to follow along. And that's where we start with our findings. So the first finding is the Star CIO contract was not properly procured pursuant to the Orange County procurement policy. And there's a couple of reasons for that. The first of which Commissioner Swikata told us that she used Star CIO and Gartner for quotes, as well as another company called Securance. The committee found that Star CIO was a valid quote and Gartner was a valid quote. However, with respect to Securance, there was no dialogue. They were never spoken to. As a matter of fact, they weren't spoken to until after the Star CIO contract was enforced. And even then, it was about a different piece of work that they needed. So I guess what they did was they printed from a computer a list of pricing, and that doesn't comply with the piggybacking federal standard. So Securance was not a valid quote. On January 31st, 2024, the committee received a letter from County Attorney Rick Golden, where he said Securance was not a quote that they used to procure this contract, but in fact, the third quote was from UTC. And keep in mind, UTC is a vendor here with the county now. Using that UTC quote was in fact a contract that is currently in existence with the County of Orange from 2021, and the price lists were from 2019, we believe. And we know that because we got that contract from the whistleblower that met with the legislative chairwoman and the legislative council. So that was a different scope of the work. And the reason that the county hired Star CIO in the first place was because UTC was labeled by many of the presenters as a failed vendor. So the concept of hiring UTC to review the work of UTC, the committee found that to be absurd. And that failed vendor quote came in the tapes from Commissioner Swikata, Director D'Amico, Commissioner Chapman, and the county executive himself. That UTC was a failed vendor and they needed someone to come in and review that. Next, I'll move you to page 43. That's our second finding. Record-keeping practices relative to the Star CO contract were not compliant with the Orange County procurement policy. Failure to produce a written justification for the continuity exemption that allowed for the Second Amendment of the Star CO contract, which expanded the scope of services and added personnel, did not comply with the Orange County procurement policy. So what happened was the county had a contract with Star CIO, then they did a continuity exemption and did a first amendment to the contract. Then they provided a second amendment to the contract without doing that continuing exemption letter, which is not in line with the county procurement policy. And that also expanded the services at that time as well. And then I'll move you to page 45. And this is a kind of a second finding under that record keeping piece. Department procuring the Star CIO contract failed to comply with the record keeping requirements of the procurement policy. So when the Democratic caucus, the members of the Democratic caucus asked for those records, the county attorney sent them the quotes from Star CIO, Gartner, and the paperwork from Securance with nothing else. So what should happen is someone should be able to reach into a file, whether it be electronic or paper, and say, here's all the documents you're looking for. And the fact that that didn't happen leads us to believe that that record wasn't proper. As a matter of fact, it took them until January 31st to decide that the third bidder, UTC, or January 30th, 2024, UTC was in fact the third quote they were using. If that was so, it should have been in that file and turned over at the time it was requested. So we would like, we think they should have a written record of each contract, and that it should be clear, concise, and right in the file so that there's no confusion. For instance, anybody should be able to go into that office with the authority and say, give me the copy of the procurement of such and such a contract, and it should be readily available and easily produced, depending on size, of course. Then we'll move to page 47. And it's our third finding. Commissioner of Human Resources Langdon Chapman was not responsible for the procurement of the Star CIO contract. As I said when I opened, he made a suggestion of a qualified individual. And we actually have emails from Mr. Chapman to Ms. D'Amico saying, use my brother-in-law if you want, don't use him if you don't want to, keep me out of it, don't talk to me about it, don't discuss pricing with me, don't discuss anything. And I guess he gave her 2 books that he wrote with respect to the topic, but we didn't see any, nobody gave us any information that he was involved other than that suggestion of a qualified individual. Let's see, on the same page at the bottom, letter D, still on page 47, another finding, Star CIO and Isaac Sokolic did not engage in any wrongdoing. Let's face it, the county, he put in a bid to the county for work, the county accepted it, they hired him. And we also know in speaking to both Ms. Swikata and Ms. D'Amico that they both thought that he performed beyond their expectations. So he put in a valid bid, performed beyond their expectations, and move things along properly. Now we'll move to page, and while I'm here, there's absolutely no evidence that the individual was in dire financial straits. I want to stress that again as well, because that was a wild accusation. Moving on to page 49, finding E, we found that all legislators involved in the October 25th, 23 press conference failed to act responsibly. That brings us back to the allegations against Mr. Sokolic, where some of the individuals stood there with actual documents in their hand, held them up and said, this individual's house is in foreclosure. And someone with an 8th grade education could have read that document. It said in plain English, this mortgage is paid in full. So the allegation that you had to be a lawyer or something, that was just absolutely unsubstantiated and, again, absurd. People should do their due diligence before making wild accusations against people. Finding F on page 50. A review of the contracts, bills, invoices, and other appropriate records relative to the failed vendor, UTC, must be completed. All the, four people that came before us, Commissioner Swikata, Commissioner Chapman, Director D'Amico, and Executive Newhouse, all called UTC a failed vendor, yet they're still here working for us. They've been here since 2015. And I'm not saying that their work is good, bad, or indifferent. This is what we were told by members of the executive branch. And that's all in here with footnotes back to the videos as we discussed. Remember that a whistleblower did come to us. When I say us, I mean Chairwoman Benelli and Legislative Council with some of the UTC contracts, not all, indicating that they thought there were issues. The committee asked the county attorney's office on December 11th, both in person, me asking at the meeting, and then in an email from Legislative Council to County Attorney Golden. To date, we have gotten nothing from the county attorney's office with respect to the UTC contracts. We do realize that they go back to 2015 and it might be a lot of volumes, but here we are as of today, February 21st, having nothing from December 11th. I'll get to more of the recommendations about UTC there. So somebody needs to look at that and you'll see that in our recommendations. Now, those are our findings. Now we're going to move to recommendations on page 51. And our first one is that the procurement policy must be redrafted. There are problems within the procurement policy. Moving on to page 52. Another recommendation, the procurement process must be diligently addressed by the executive branch. And what we mean by that is we had contradictory statements. Commissioner Swikata and Director D'Amico actually told us that the other hired Star CIO. We said, who hired Star CIO? Commissioner Swikata said, Director D'Amico. We asked Director D'Amico that question and she said, Commissioner Swikata hired him. So to this day, we still don't know who hired Star CIO. And that needs to be spelled out. There should be no confusion. The contract cover sheet is not good. The contract cover sheet listed a lead/negotiator. The Deputy Executive Harry Port told us that he looks at that line as to see that the contract was negotiated. On that contract, the name that appeared there was Alicia D'Amico. She said she was not the negotiator, she was the lead contact. So it ultimately, nobody negotiated that contract. And Mr. Poor told us when he reads that cover sheet, he actually assumes that if there's a name in that box, somebody negotiated the contract. In this case, nobody negotiated it, but Mr. Poor, when he signed it, told us he thought somebody did, and he was surprised as we were when he heard them say that it wasn't negotiated. So we were recommending that they revamp that cover sheet so that there's no confusion. Who hired the vendor should be there, who was the negotiator, who was the lead contact from the county. Another thing that we found actually horrific with respect to the process was confidential information was revealed, highly confidential information was revealed to the director of STAR CIO before he was a vendor for this county. It was in November, way before contracts were signed. They were still in discussions. And the information that was given over was considered so highly sensitive with respect to the IT that the legislators, not on the committee, were not allowed to see it. And the legislators that were on the committee got it in redacted form. Now, the county attorney, in his defense, did say we could see it in unredacted form, and we chose not to. He did leave it on the table for us. We chose not to because we didn't think it mattered to us. But if it's that sensitive that we as legislators can't see it, it certainly should not be sent out. And when I asked the question, how could you send that out without a contract? They said, well, we needed a good quote. And so they thought they needed that information. I said, well, the person is not even under contract with non-disclosure or anything. Technically, that person is a member of the public. And Ms. D'Amico was unresponsive when I asked her, how did that happen? She just said, oh. So that can never happen again. Sensitive information must be maintained in-house. Our next, on page 53, another recommendation. The administration of contracts must be diligently addressed by the executive branch. What we mean by that is the first contract was signed for $65,000. And prior to any amendments or continuing agreements being signed, the contractor was paid $130,000. So it was allowed to be to 65. It was in fact paid to 130. And the county attorney actually told us that should not have happened and that was in fact a mistake. So we're recommending that invoices in excess of the contract will never be paid and that contract extensions must be in place before those funds are expended, including written justifications for the continuity exemption. And the continuity exemption in our mind should be expanded to justify why that vendor is staying on past that contract period. In many cases, it makes sense. It's not a criticism, but the documentation is where the criticism lies. We keep contractors on many times because they already started on a project and it makes sense rather than going back to the start. And my perfect example of that is Delaware Engineering with respect to the sewer project that has had continuing agreements. You wouldn't want to start over when you're that much into a contract, but the documentation is where the key must be. Measures must be put in place that these payments never exceed the contract amounts. And we'll move to page 54. The procurement record must be properly maintained. I sort of covered that earlier where someone could just walk in there, either pull a file electronically or paper, however they choose to do it, and that there's no question. There's a uniform method in procurement with respect to records. We're all in one spot. Someone should be responsible for maintaining these files so that there's no confusion to anybody who needs that particular information. On that same page, letter E, commissioners, deputy commissioners, and directors should always uphold their oath of office. They should be honest and truthful in fulfilling their duties to the best of their abilities. And when appearing before the legislative committees, honesty to the answers presented is not only necessary, but expected. All of the directors, deputy commissioners, well, not the deputy commissioners, but the commissioners and directors are confirmed by this legislature, but they all take an oath of office just like we do. And and that there should be truthful when appearing before us. Moving to page 56. All contracts, invoices, payment records, and related documents requested by this committee relative to UTC should be sent to an outside agency. So I got into that a little bit before. UTC has been a vendor since 2015. The whistleblower that came forward had concerns, and many of the presenters that came before us called them a failed vendor. Again, not our words, the presenters, and they all use that same term, failed vendor. So the committee is recommending that once we get all the UTC contracts from the county attorney's office, that we forward those to the office of the New York State Comptroller for review and advisory opinion. So that's the last of our recommendations. And now I'm going to move you to the conclusion on page, which is the same page 56 you're on. And only because I can't be more eloquent than our legislative attorney, I'm just going to simply read it for the public's benefit. Our conclusion is the members of this committee are thankful for the responsibility of performing this review as tasked by resolution of the full legislature. It should be emphasized that this committee found no evidence of fraud, corruption, or criminality relative to the procurement of the Star CIO contract. And really what we mean there is improper procurement is not a crime. It's a mistake. The committee acknowledges that a tremendous amount of good has come out of this review. Particularly, the committee is aware, pursuant to information received by the county attorney on January 31st, 2024. His response was that the executive branch has already undertaken efforts to update the procurement policy and contract administration practices. Among these efforts are the impaneling of a special committee comprised of the Commissioner of Finance, the Budget Director, the Information Technology CIO, the County Attorney, and the Chief Assistant County Attorney for Contracts. And they're to recommend substantive changes to the county's procurement, contract administration, and payment policies and procedures. That group implemented new controls in the county software to require not to exceed amounts for contracts, preventing the payment of any amount to a contractor vendor more than the not to exceed amount on each contract. Further, a new procurement administration policy is in the process of being drafted, and training for the new policy will be required once affirmed by this legislature. Finally, a new contract management system pilot is being tested among selected departments, and a rollout of the countywide version is expected later this year. The committee requests that these changes are presented at a meeting of the appropriate legislative statutory committee. This committee looks forward to these anticipated changes, as well as the implementation of the other recommendations made herein. Moving forward, the committee is hopeful that this examination and review of the county's current policies will assist the county in becoming a leader in procurement and contract administration. If you go forward through your book, which I'm not going to do, I have exhibits here. There'll be a copy in the legislative office, I assume, for legislators. If you need to see the actual exhibits we're talking about, your packages do not have the exhibits. A copy of this is currently up, I believe, on the county website.
It will be up immediately after this meeting.
As soon as this meeting is over, a copy of the 57-page document,
As well as the exhibits.
as well as the exhibits will be up too,
Yes.
as well as the exhibits will be up on the county website. You want to tell them how they can find it?
Just go straight to the county website and go to the legislative page. It will be seen as a link on the right-hand side of the legislative page.
So I guess in conclusion, I'll tell you that the county attorney told us at our meeting of December 11th that they heard what the commissioners and directors said to our committee in answer to our questions. And they right away set up this committee and started making changes to improve the process. We have these as recommendations. Some of the stuff that we recommended, they told us they're already doing because they saw it as an issue just as we did. So I think a lot of good did come out of this. I know a lot of work went into it, and Betsy worked nights and weekends, and the committee worked very hard on this to make it good. I told Katie when she asked me to chair it, I probably wasn't going to make any friends, but that we were going to do it right. And I know Tom is here as well. I don't know if you want to comment on it.
I just have to say, I want to thank Betsy so much for her hard, diligent work. Our staff did an amazing job of putting this mountain of paperwork together. And compliments to you, Chairman. You ran a great meeting. You kept focus on the task at hand. And the presenters that came, you gave them the benefit of the doubt for them to present their information in an open forum. And that's something that at the state and national level, they should take a look and see how you ran those meetings, because you did a great job. So thank you, Kevin.
Thank you. I don't know if Rob or Kevin is here or not. And I'm happy to answer any questions anybody has.
Okay, first I want to recognize the chair, Kitty.
Thank you, and I'd like to echo some of the sentiments of Legislator Fagion. You know, when you're faced with decisions like this, you have to make some hard choices. And it was clearly evident that this needed to take a very deep dive into it. Not everybody is willing to spend that amount of time and effort into looking at all this. So I am sincerely grateful to Kevin Hines for assuming the role as leader in all of this. I said to him the other day, "Are you still speaking to me?" I think it's more work than anybody thought it was going to be. And your partners in the team, Legislator Sassy, Majority Leader Fagion, along with Legislator Lujan, all worked so collaboratively well together. It was actually something, you know, you take little things out of difficult decisions as you're working, but to watch all of them and their dialogue back and forth as far as what goes in the report, it was purely all of them focused on the mission. And the mission was to reveal the truth that was brought forth. This is all what those people that were interviewed in county government had to contribute. And then the report pursued with all of the attachments, with all of the documents. It was a lot of reading, a lot of time behind the scenes, and we won't even go into how much time legislative council spent with all of this. I know all of us received phone calls from her on holidays, weekends, Saturday nights. She worked very diligently to make sure that we had a good, strong, solid report that revealed the facts and trying not to put opinions in it. These are the facts as were presented by the people that were interviewed that had something to do with the operation of county government. It was very refreshing to see, as you said at the end, Kevin, that the legislative branch understood that as we were going through this process, certain things were coming to light. They didn't waste any time. So I applaud their efforts in moving forward, putting together the corrective actions that they saw that needed to be done, and they continue to do so, and I applaud that effort. But I can't tell you how proud I am of those four legislators that worked on this report. It was really wonderful and very heartwarming to see how everybody could just stay focused and present a good, solid report. And I thank them very, very much for all of their efforts, especially Kevin.
Thank you. And the committee did vote unanimously to accept this report as our finalized document. Okay. If anybody has questions, I'm happy.
With that, I'll open it up to questions. Well, you did a hell of a job explaining it, Kevin.
Thank you.
That sounds good.
All right, well, if there's no questions, I will say the agenda is clear and look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Joan and Cheney. All in favor?
Aye.